and welcome to Rauta, this time of Estonian black metal. Or maybe we should just start talking about black and roll, because this is exactly what this Schwarze side project is all about, with the second album called Schwarze Estnische Schweinerei. That's about how perfect my German is. This was a Werewolf promotion release, and this was in a curious case. Originally it was meant to be released already in 2015 in CD format. The story is actually right here. But due to some difficulties, this CD version came as late as December 2020. And it's been on the queue for a couple of months now, and now it's time to start talking about this Schwarze album. As you can see, no booklet whatsoever, so you won't find lyrics. Quite simple, very basics CD, or shall we say digipack CD version with glossy covers. What you have here is almost 45 minutes of black metal music in a rock and roll style. By rock and roll styling, mean that black and roll, as it is so often called. Now, this band is quite old, given that there are only 2 albums out, and they were these albums from 2013 and 2015, respectively, being this one the second one. Before that, the band had some EPs and singles out there, and what makes this kind of a more like a project band is that, well, 2 of these members have common ground with some of the bands. They have a lot of history with other bands, so this is more or less kind of a side project that is operating, under these bigger names. But under, I once again mean, probably the bigger bands, the main bands, have more saying what happens and when, and these kind of projects just move on when there's suitable time and all that for that kind of things. Now, be it as may, it still doesn't mean that the music is kind of a second grade. Quite the opposite, this is actually pretty good, considering this is not the most active one out there. And as such, this is interesting to see, because these kind of albums so often go, as just so to say, under the radar, because, you don't have bigger labels to support these, and when bands are not the main project but kind of a side adventure, they often got overlooked by so many people. Now, Schwarze's second album reminds me a lot of what Satyricon was doing around 1999, 2000, something along those lines, with albums such as Rebel Extravaganza and Volcano. While not purely maybe the definition of black and roll, there are lots of similarities with partially the songwriting, riffs, and all that general feeling of the album. Now, even though this might sound like it's a kind of say retro kind of thing, after all, those albums are more than 20 years of age nowadays, it still feels quite timeless with its rockin' black kind of a thing. And one might even say there are other bands which has the same style, but kind of a modern age, not that 20 years old and all that stuff. So all in all, this sounds very, very Nordic-like. I would say mostly what the Norwegian bands were doing already years and years ago, but still doesn't have the kind of a copycat feeling. Now, this is very easy an album to get into, because you kind of have these rock and rollist feelings, even though the tracks here are a little bit lengthier than your typical rock and roll song with its 3 minutes and then some. And it doesn't really bother. These songs have quite a nice flow. They're really easy to get into and just kind of start listening. You will have guitar solos and some kind of a riffs which are definitely more on the rocker style than the more kind of a more extreme side of black metal. So if you would consider comparing this one to bands such as Marduk, being very violent and aggressive, or the kind of a raw end of black metal, this would sound very easy listening. Now, this is still way more rockin', and maybe in that sense more extreme, if you will, than compared to so many more melodic or atmospheric black metal bands. So there's certain kind of a groove and flow with the music, which definitely separates this one the more traditional sense of black metal. You really can't put this on the same page as, say, Battery and say, yeah, these are one and the same kind of thing. But definitely, with the raspy vocals and the kind of a guitar sound, which is very much present here, this is clearly a black metal album. Just a lot of rock and roll put into that. And as such, I think this is a relatively nice album to listen to. Now, my only real complaint about the album and the songwriting is that while this is operating on the field of black and roll, it could be a lot catchier. I mean, a lot catchier. There are no songs that are like instant hits, the kind of songs which could be said, hey, this is the black metal version of Motorhead. No, this is clearly not there as yet. But I think if this band was more active and this was more about honing and polishing the style, this could be really, really catchy material. Even if that would mean like it would sound less black metal all in all. Now, be it as may, I think this is worth recommending, even if I'm not really big into this. I mean, it's very likable, it's very decent, it sounds pretty good and all that stuff, and those vocals, which operate somewhere between the kind of typical raspy black metal vocals and the kind of a growly or death metal vocals, they're quite nice, but still what this would need is even more the kind of a catchy tunes kind of a thing. Even if that is not your cup of tea, per se, I would still say give Schwarze a chance. This is surprisingly good, and I hope the band will be doing more material in coming years. 5 years since this one, well, almost 6 years by now, so I hope they keep going and would actually elevate this from a mere side project to something more active, something more prominent. But we'll see about that. Meanwhile, take a look, take a listen, and enjoy.